if you are not in the field, like someone looking from the outside, artificial intelligence looks like a very singular field, like something with very singularity when you have to do a lot of things. But it's something that probably has the most amount of collaboration, right? Like you work with data analysts, domain experts. I work with people who are expert in trees and
Alright, so hello everyone, and welcome to the AI Stories podcast. I'm Neil Leiser, I'm a data scientist at iWaka, and I will be your host. So today, our guest is Smriti Mishra. Smriti first did a Bachelor of Technology in Electronics and Communication Engineering in Bangalore. She then had a bunch of experiences, but at some point she actually moved to Sweden, where she worked as an AI researcher at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. In 2020, she joined Earthbanc as the head of data science, and Earthbanc is a startup which is financing carbon projects to scale climate solutions. She is now actually back to the Royal Institute of Technology, where she recently started a new position as an applied AI and data science researcher, but she's still based in Sweden. So today we'll talk about Smriti's career, about transitioning from electronics to machine learning and data science, about moving from India to Sweden, but we'll also talk about AI applied to climate change, about working in industry vs working in research, and we'll hear Smriti's advice on how to progress in your career. All right, so if you enjoyed the episodes, don't hesitate to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to the AI Stories YouTube channel. Let's start with the fun bit now. Hi, Smriti, how is it going? How are you today?
Hi, I'm really good and really happy to be here with you. And, sometimes the weeks can be hectic, but yeah, hopefully the day is done.
Yeah, good. Happy to connect with you. We chatted I don't know, a few months ago, but finally we managed to record the episode. So yeah, really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Really looking forward to it.
So I mentioned in the intro that you first studied electronics and communication engineering in India. So I'm curious, how did you go from this in India to moving to Sweden and working on AI and data science? How did you do this transition? What happened in your life?
So for me, it was basically two important key motivators that sort of, helped me to explore the field of artificial intelligence, machine learning. Maybe a couple of side factors also, but the two key motivators were that when I was doing my bachelor's, I tried out a lot of different things because I hated electronics. And
Why did you hate it?
I don't know. It was a lot of writing and a lot of calculus, vectors, yeah. It was fun in the beginning when I was doing integrations and differentiations in school, but it just got too much for me, I guess, at a point. And maybe the way we were learning it as well, it was not very applied, more theoretical than I really wanted it to be. That sort of helped me lose interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, a lot of the subjects like VLSI, communications, they were, as I said, very theory based. That's why I decided to specialize in this. We had three domains that we could specialize in. One was VLSI, which is more of embedded technology. Then we had communication and signal processing. So I stuck with signal processing because it's more of applied mathematics, Fourier transform stuff, and also has a very close correlation with image processing, signal processing, and eventually machine learning, pattern recognition, all those things. So yeah, so then I worked on one of the one of all student satellites, nano satellites in India. And I worked on the detumbling part of the satellite. So once you launch the satellite, we have to stabilize it. So I worked on the stabilization part using C, C++, like a lot of coding. So then I realized that I like the coding part, but I don't really like very mechanical applications, mostly because I didn't have the background, and domain expertise and understanding what you're doing is so important. So but then I wrote the paper on it, and then it got accepted at the International Aeronautical Federation in Bremen, Germany, back in 2018. And I came to present the paper. And that's when I attended one deep learning lecture at ETH Zurich under Konukoglu, the professor. And it was just so amazing. And I was like, this is probably something that I want to do and I want to explore. And I was always like into linear algebra and probability, permutation combinations. They always really intrigued me. And at the same time, I also had a very close relative who was suffering from cancer, but we couldn't discover at the right time to talk with the help of doctors and stuff that it's cancer. So she had a tumor, and instead of removing it, the tumor was slit open. So basically, it spread all across, and it just got so much worse. Probably could have been treated if we knew at the right time. So this was something that like kept bothering us, or was in our mind, that what if we knew, like using technology or using something, if we knew that it was cancer, then we would have approached it different, and she probably would have been with us still. So so these were the two key motivators. And so I started taking subjects within pattern recognition, artificial neural networks, pattern recognition, I said already that, probability, more of like linear algebra basics, statistics, machine learning, and all these subjects, in order to build like a foundation around artificial intelligence, which I lacked before. And the first project that I ended up doing in machine learning was a lung cancer detection and prediction model. And eventually, I developed an interest around the healthcare domain in general, and the applications of machine learning, and in general, like technology around it. So that's how I started, probably in this field. And then I wrote a lot of cold emails to professors in Europe. And
Sorry, can I just jump back still on what you mentioned before, because you already shared a lot of info, and it was, I think, quite also interesting and quite a sad story, I guess, for, I mean, that's someone, basically what made you realize the importance of AI was, first of all, this lecture that you really enjoyed, but also the story of your friends. Did both of those events happen at the same time? And after those two events, you were like, okay, I really want to start a career in AI? And also, can you go a bit deeper into why? Was it because you saw the impact that AI could have on people's life?
yeah, so this happened pretty much within a duration of 2.5, 3 months, so almost parallelly. And then we lost her some months after I came back from the Europe trip that I had gone to in Germany. So it was almost at the same time that all of this happened. And yeah, hence it was like a huge motivator for me. And like, if someone asks about one of my key strengths, um, I don't think it's technology or it's communication or anything. It's probably just that I don't think I know the concept of like giving up in life. It's like, even if everyone in the world is like, no, this is not possible, I would be like, okay, let's at least try and make it happen. If not that, then the closest thing to that. So for me, it was really important that, like, I contribute in a way that at least someone does not go through the same thing that we did. And in my head, it was it was not a difficult task to achieve, right? Like a correct diagnosis of cancer with the technology and the world we live in and everything so advanced. It should not be a very complex task. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to work in the field, and wanted to sort of make sure that, someone else doesn't go through it, basically.
No, I see. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I understand. And yeah, it should have been quite difficult. So is it at this point that you actually realize, okay, I want to do AI, but I want to do AI for healthcare because you had this story with um, the person that was close to you. And so you wanted to help with this. And that's why you started in healthcare, essentially.
Yeah, that's definitely like a very key reason that I started in healthcare. And after that, even when I was working at Earthbanc, within climate change domain, also something that's very close to, I guess, most people right now. Um, I did a freelancing consulting, like part-time project, 5 months in healthcare again. So healthcare is something that's always going to be super close to me. If it's a project that does not require a huge amount of domain experience, then I'm always like up for a healthcare project. I also worked very briefly with one project in which was based out of the United States as well, like in November last year. So it's like I keep trying to, keep in touch with healthcare projects.
So you work in healthcare. I think you start in Sweden? Is that right? When you start working in AI, it's in Sweden, and then at some point you decide to switch from healthcare to climate change. Why do you switch from one? Well, you remain within the AI field, but you move from healthcare to climate change. So why do you switch from one to another?
So basically, I was working within computational neuroscience, but I was working in abstract conditions because I like had a decent, I mean, not even decent, like I had a very minor understanding of how human brain works, like different parts of the human brain, like hippocampus, amygdala, what it does, what part gets triggered when. But then computational neuroscience requires like so much more in-depth understanding of the biology aspects as well. And I mean, I could have done it maybe, but at that point, I thought that maybe, I can try a different domain. And when I was in India, I didn't really realize what was happening like with climate so much. Maybe because I was in university there, like I was going to school, and like the priorities were a little different at that time, with the paper and like family and like what was happening. And it wasn't also so made aware of like the issues of climate change back then in India, like back in 2018. I think now it's so much better. But when I came to Sweden, I realized I had some friends who were studying sustainability at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. And my second winter in Stockholm, in like the winter of 2020, like late 2019, early 2020, that was my second winter here. And it snowed just one day, like a proper snow where the snow stays and you have like knee deep snow and stuff. It used to flurry, but very less snow. And I realized that, like it's not good for, like the climate in general for Nordic countries. There were like ice caps that were melting. Early 2020, there were some horrible bushfires in Australia. And I was working at Earthbanc. No, like I was working at KTH back then, but I was still, like keeping in touch with everything. And so by the time I decided that I would look for a job, I was sort of aware in my head that I wanted to be either in healthcare domain or climate. Um, and I got a good opportunity in climate, and that's how I got into it.
Okay, I see. So if I recap from now, you studied your bachelor in India, you didn't like electronics, So you moved to AI because you were really interested in deep learning and because of the story of your relative that you experienced. And after that, you start working in AI and healthcare in research at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. But then at some point, you actually realize that climate is also important, and you end up working at Earthbanc. Is that right? You're making
Yeah,
the switch.
yeah. So, I mean, I think I had my options open within healthcare, but I just had, and also the problem was that probably I think one of the problems also was at that point, if I think of it now, was that within healthcare, you need the language. Like if I'm working in Sweden, I would need at least
Mm-hmm.
some understanding of the language, right? Because most of the documentations, the interactions, like a lot of things, they are in Swedish. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was like an absolute barrier, but it's kind of limited my options a little, at least. And yeah, there were a lot of very interesting projects happening back then at Earthbanc and in general in the Swedish startup industry and even like within big companies about sustainability, climate change. And yeah, so it just intrigued me so much. And I really understood the importance of, if we don't act right now, what would happen to the future generations. So yeah.
Okay, no, I see. That makes sense. So let's talk about Earthbank now. You mentioned, well, you work there as the head of data science. So first of all, I wasn't familiar with Earthbank before recording the episode or before we chatted. So what is Earthbank? What is the company doing? And can you maybe explain on a high level why is AI helping the company?
Yeah, definitely. So Earthbank is a startup that basically it's a climate fintech startup, which works within the domain of carbon sequestration, analyzing or understanding, getting a better understanding of how much carbon is stored in a certain biome or biodiversity, and also working within the digital payment industry. Um, so basically, I think it started back in September of 2019, and I joined in August 2020, so pretty early. Um, and people are like extremely driven and nice, like, to actually make a difference and putting in all the efforts they can, and a very diverse team as well. The CEO and um, the COO, they are from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
We have a compliance person who is like the head of sort of like leads the sustainability division, like environmental division. He's from Sweden. There are some people working in from Prague, Budapest, like a lot of different places, like UK. So a very diverse, like a nice cocktail of like different cultures, different ideas, innovations. Um, and yeah, like right now, even when I'm working for the AI for diversity, I realize that diversity and inclusion, like it's so important to bring in
Mm-hmm.
innovation. It's sort of something that brings
Yeah.
it all together. So back then we were working with using satellite images, 2D and 3D data from satellite images to get a better understanding of the carbon sequestration. And this would eventually help landowners, small landowners who couldn't really get their area verified for the amount of carbon that they are working very hard towards sequestering. So it would help them get an estimate, and then they could get incentivized the right way.
Okay.
So that's what Earthbank is doing. And for that, like using artificial intelligence, remote sensing, geographical information systems, and like some really cool technology. I learned so much and still so much to learn. But yeah.
Can we maybe dive a bit deeper into the concept of carbon sequestration? I don't know if everyone is familiar with this. How does it work essentially, and how does your company make money in the end, and how do you help people who are planting trees or doing good things for the planet? How do you help them as well?
So it's a very interesting concept of carbon sequestration, which I also actually learned when I started working for Earthbanc. So basically, like if you are, like living your life in general, you use light, electricity, heating, if you're living in Sweden or any of the colder countries. Or if you're living in something like someplace like India, you use a lot of air conditioner, you can't survive without it. So when we do all these things, or even based on what we eat, right? Like if we eat a lot of meat or animal-based products, or Coca-Cola, things like that, like general, normal, everyday habits. Based on that, we basically emit a lot of carbon into the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And basically, that's the reason for climate change, right? Like if you look at it, that it's difficult to change people's habits. I think of it as simple as that. If we all understood better, then it would have been a little easier to deal with maybe. So or shopping, that's also like a huge thing when it comes to emitting carbon. So things like that are normal
I
activities.
feel it's also because we are just maybe a bit, well, some of us or a lot of us are also selfish. Like even some, I mean, we kind of know about it, but we still, because we don't see it, or because it doesn't seem real, or because it doesn't really impact our day-to-day lives. Okay, maybe 1 year it snows less, as you mentioned, but you're not gonna get hurt or have a big impact. Maybe that's also why
Yeah,
we're not doing enough.
absolutely. I definitely agree. I mean, right now, as Barack Obama also mentioned, Mr. Barack Obama, that like we are the last generation who can do something about it, and the first generation who can actually feel or see some effects of it. But then the effects are maybe not significant enough for us to change our everyday habits, right? Um, I think if people made like a little wiser decision, right? If you already have like 4 pair of shoes, you don't need six.
Mhm.
So, so things like that. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. So when you have all these carbon emissions, in order to basically reduce the effect of the carbon dioxide that's being emitted, what we can do is that we can plant trees or take care of already existing trees, etc.,
Mhm.
like not cut them, not indulge in deforestation, illegal poaching, etc. So basically, when the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is absorbed into a certain biodiversity, it's stored or sequestered, and then it stays there and it's not in the environment. So that whole concept is the concept of carbon sequestration. And so basically, if we have X amount of carbon emission, we can calculate our carbon footprint, which is basically just a measure of how much carbon you're emitting. And then based on that, we can sequester similar or same amount of carbon dioxide, like if I have like plant trees for that, or like take care of or adopt a certain tree or certain area based on how much my carbon sequestration is. So something like that, that's kind of the concept that our business model that it works on.
I just now wanted to know how AI plays a role in climate change. Like, why is AI so important in this sector, and how did you use AI basically to help you with that?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very, very interesting question. And so I have used artificial intelligence to, work with carbon sequestration. And we actually ended up filing a patent when
Mhm.
I was working at Earthbanc. I think it's still pending. They take a long time. But yeah, and currently, when I'm working as a researcher, like an applied AI and data science researcher here at KTH Royal Institute of Technology again, I'm also using artificial intelligence and some of GIS, geographical information systems, um, for making better climate decisions, or in order to basically tackle climate change in general. So
Can before we dive into this AI at your new position, can you explain? I understand we're not going to talk in details about Earthbanc. We're going to talk in more details about AI at your new position. But why did you make this change? Like, you were the head of data science, and then you decide to kind of go back to research, if I understand well. So, or back to university. Why did you make this change from Earthbanc to KTH?
so I actually want to do my master's.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be very difficult to do it working with a startup with a lot of responsibilities. And I thought that I would not be able to actually give my 100%, because sometimes it can be really long hours, right? And the startup was also growing, which means a lot more responsibilities if I stayed. And I have a master's admit from a university in Sweden, Uppsala University, which is the oldest university here in data science, machine learning, statistics. Um, so I wanted to, come back to research so that I can work parallelly. And I thought it would be a good experience also, because if I'm working at a university and also doing masters, it would be like a unique experience, and I wouldn't have to look for student jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. So you're doing both at the same time. You're doing research plus master.
So I'll start my master's from 29th August, but it's all set.
Okay.
They also said that my fee is waived, so I'm good.
Okay. No, great. So yeah, sorry, I cut you, but can you now move back to explain then what is your research about, and how do you use AI to help improve the climate change?
Yeah, definitely. So I can give you an example of what I'm doing right now at my
Yeah,
job
sure.
at KDH. So I'm working on sort of analyzing the change in forest cover, deforestation, carbon sequestration, and trying a little bit on understanding the soil organic carbon, which is basically the carbon that's stored in the soil. And you analyze the moisture and everything, which also involves some lab tests. So yeah, so trying to work on all of those right now at here in this university. Also working on the same things for the development of towards the development of a commune in Sweden, Gotland commune. So there's this university or institute based in between that area. And this area is surrounded by forests, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
not very dense, scattered forest area. And it's a unique place because it's carbon neutral as of now, or at least based on the research that I read. So I'm doing an analysis where I collect satellite images and from different sources, open source or through the university, or different ways. And then based on different satellite bands, I can extract different information that I need. Like a satellite image in general has 14 different bands. So based on what information you want to um, analyze, you can use a combination of whatever bands you need. So right now I'm working on the red, green, blue, infrared, near infrared bands mostly, and also combining it with some 3D satellite data like digital elevation model or digital surface models, etc. And based on these, I can get the count of trees, height and girth, something like that, and then understanding the species of the tree, for example, and also if I can get an estimate of when it was planted. So all that information can give me help me get an approximation of the carbon that could be sequestered in that particular region. So I
Okay.
can, yeah.
Okay, I see. So you have a lot of data. You mentioned elevation data, satellite images, and you're trying to predict or to estimate the type of trees and the number of trees that there are in your region. Is that right?
So I can
What is the output of your machine learning model, essentially?
yeah. So I can actually get the trees, like the tree species and the plantation year from the database
Okay.
when it's planted. So that data is easy to get. So the output would be an estimation of how much carbon is sequestered in this area, like maybe like 1600 gigatons of carbon or something like that. And it can also, and the output could also be something like forest cover. Like back in 2010, there was X amount of forest cover, and now it's like Y amount. And what's the change if there's a net loss or gain? Which area there's a loss, which area there's a gain? So things like that.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So you want to estimate the amount of carbon that your region can actually sequestrate, which means process and take out of the air, essentially, in simple terms. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm not a climate expert. And how do you train such a model? Like how, because you need data on what the carbon sequestration volume or whatever amount was during the previous days or the previous years. So how do you train such a model?
So it's usually like I think the last time I worked on it, I used probably 10 GB of data, which was my laptop was like my Mac was dying. Um, it said 33 hours to train the model, and I was working on a CNN convolutional neural network model. So it said it would take 33 hours. But then this is cloud provider back then when I was working on, like sort of by myself ish, kind of remote, not exactly in the premises. So I used a online cloud provider, Paperspace, and I used GB100 into 8 GPUs, and then it was trained in 8 hours, I think, like 7.5 8 hours. But right now, since I'm associated with the university and I'm here physically in Sweden, not remote anymore, I can just request them for like a computer with a higher processing, and I have to fill in like a request maybe like 3 weeks in advance, and I can just use it, which will help with the computations a lot.
But how do you get the data? I guess, how do you get the target, like the amount of carbon? You need some kind of ground truth, right? What was
Yeah.
the amount of carbon, I don't know, last year or 2 days ago? How do you get this data?
So basically, a lot of it was done using. So also they had sort of kept like um, a lot of like data base when they were like planting and when they were doing different activities. And then for like the first initial times, we also used the like more traditional ways by which carbon sequestration is calculated if it's not done using technology. So and then like cross-referenced it, and it was pretty like okay, like usable. The first time I worked on it, it was about 74% accurate, and then we worked our way through it. So now it's more like around 90-ish.
Okay.
But yeah, but sometimes I'm scared of like overfitting and everything. So
Okay, so you take from other sources and then you match that to the images, the past images that you have, and
yeah,
like
and
this too.
also, yeah, exactly. So like the traditional methods, right? Like measuring trees and everything, and then extrapolating the results, getting it calculated more statistically. So and then sort of comparing the results in different areas. So usually there are different databases that's available on the internet also, either done by there are some organizations who do it, like Gold Standard, Red Plus. So there are some organizations who work on providing the quotation of the carbon estimated, and they are like the standard, that's global standard that's followed in the world. And there are different types of carbon credits that can be issued. So we can also reference it using the methodology that they follow, and then do it with the same methodology to get an estimate or calculation of how it would be, how much it would be based on the ground truth. Yeah.
And what do you think is the biggest challenge when you need to, I don't know, estimate that, train a model? Is it to collect the data? Is it to find the best model? Is it to train the model? I don't know. What do you think is the most difficult in this project?
The data, I mean, it's like if you are still working with like a developed place or some place which has a good like larger database, it's still okay. But there are some places in which the data is just like, so scarce. It's so difficult to find the data, and the data is so expensive if you want to buy it. um, and another problem is that if I'm working on a small space, and I want to buy the satellite images, you usually get it in 25 square kilometer. And if I am working on a small data, then I end up paying for 90% of the data that I don't need, right? So so data is the problem. Like the first time when I was working on the project, I struggled for maybe like 4.5, 5 months to collect enough data to start
Wow.
working on it through several different resources. And at that time, we had a partnership with the European Space Agency. I was working with Earthbanc. That still helped so much. But even with European Space Agency, you get like good data if you want to work with Sweden, for example. But I was trying to work on another project in a not so developed country and in the southern hemisphere, and it was very difficult to collect the data itself. And I had to use a lot of open source data, which is not that good, like quality wise the resolution is pretty bad.
Yeah, that's interesting, I think, because when we do AI and machine learning at university or in research, usually you have the data, right? And you need to, I mean, if you work on computer vision, you have ImageNet or standard data sets. If you work on NLP, you have more than enough text data sets. And so you never think about how are we going to get this data, because the data is already there for you. But in industry, just even getting the data can be
Yeah.
difficult, because sometimes you don't have data and you need to find ways to collect it, and it's not straightforward all the time.
Yeah, and some like and if you're working with like maybe like um, a company which deals with log data, then you have so much of data, but it's most of it is like gibberish, and you have to spend hours and hours cleaning it, getting yeah, I've been on both sides, I think.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So now that you've done like research and industry, you've done both. Which one do you prefer? What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of working in research vs working in industry?
So working, I think when you're working with research, you have enough time to, like let your creativity flow, try things out. You can afford to experiment a lot more, and that's a good thing. And that's something that, in my opinion, leads towards innovation in general. Like the algorithm I was working at KTH, it was created by a professor at KTH. So that was, and he used to sit like two cabins or two rooms across my professor. So that's something that was really amazing. And um, yeah, like, and you can, like you have time to learn new things, like acquire good skills. So that's something that I like about research, as opposed to like, like a fast growing startup. But I also really like the ad hoc lifestyle of a startup, and you learn so much more than what you signed up for. It's like I ended up learning a lot more, so more about sales, communication, stakeholder management, speaking to investors, pitching startups. So a lot of different things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So probably in the long run, I would like to go more towards startup or consulting side. But for now, based on what I want to do, I think, and acquire some good skills, um, this is a good option. And also it'll help with my master's as well. And I really want to do master's.
No, yeah, I think that makes sense. That's a good point, that you, in industry, you always or very often need to add value. And so you need to work on high impact project and you need to deliver solutions very quickly, right? Because you want to make money or want to make your customers happy or want to improve customers engagement. In research, I guess you have more time to experience things, try new things, do suboptimal things that may lead to longer term improvement. So yeah, I think that's a very good point and that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I now want to move on to the last part, just some regarding your career and some advice that you may have. So you're also the director of AI for diversity. And so you're involved in this community. So do you want to talk a bit about this? What is this community doing and why is diversity important in AI?
So basically, AI for diversity is one of the fastest growing communities within this space right now. And we basically work with, increasing participation of diverse communities within the world, people from different ethnicities, minorities, culture, backgrounds, like someone who maybe has not had a traditional computer science background, um, maybe someone from psychology, or someone who's an opera singer and they want to break through in this field. So this is sort of a platform where everyone could come together and try things out and innovate. And we're going to start some things in Scandinavia soon. And yeah, so it's going to be through a lot of different interesting approaches like hackathons, mentoring, collaboration. So a lot of different approaches like that. And I personally think diversity is important in everything in life and not just artificial intelligence. But it plays a very key role because for the past, like if you look at artificial intelligence, like if you look at the stats, for example, there's not a lot of people who are working in this field from minorities. Like if you look at women working in AI, it's like 22%, or it goes even bad if you like get into specifics like computer vision or something like that. And it's the same with minorities. So it's just very important. And in my opinion, it's as simple as if you are building a product for a customer, like if I'm building a product for my grandfather, I need his opinions on what the product should be like. And artificial intelligence is basically the technology that we are working on. It's for everyone in the world to use. So we need everyone's representation and inputs on it. If we don't have diverse participation, then the products we are basically delivering will not be equally useful for everyone. And right now it's a lot better, but you would have come across a lot of like things about some face recognition which was better for certain people and not for some other ethnicities. And just because of your color or facial features or the voice to text, like it's more apt if you have a longer vocal cord, for example, the gender neutral languages.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of like applications like that, and it's getting better, but it still needs a lot more. I think sometimes it gets intimidating if you are not, if you don't look like most people who work in a certain industry, or you know, it it used to happen to me sometimes, but then I'm not a person who really cares about what the other person thinks of me, so I'm good.
Don't you think another problem is also the data, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
facial recognition and things like that? The main issue here is that our data is sometimes biased. So you think that having more diverse team can help improve the data as well?
exactly. So that's also sort of what I meant when I said that we would need their opinions and inputs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the facial recognition thing, for example, it works so much better for like white men. And the reason is that probably like 90-95% of the data used, that it came from like that source. So it doesn't, if it's
Mhm.
not trained on that data, then it definitely can't recognize it, or even, the
Yeah,
model.
if minorities would have worked on this project as well, they would have
Exactly.
noticed that the data wasn't representative, and they would have done something.
Exactly. Exactly. And also the thing is, like, if I always, like, my granny used to say that known devil is better than unknown Satan. So known devil is better than unknown, like a nice spirit or something in Hindi, in the Indian language. So it's like, if like, if someone's like asking for some information and you don't know what it is about or why it's going to be used, you will not be happy or comfortable providing that information, and then therefore you have no data from that particular people, like ethnicity or group or community. So it's important that like, when you make a team, or when you make some sort of collaboration, you involve people from different places. Like, awareness, I think that's also a very important thing, like, which comes probably before data collection, in my opinion. They need to know why it's going to be used, and then they're going to
Mhm.
provide the data.
No, okay, yeah, that's a valid point, and yeah, I think it's great that you're doing this work. So yeah, keep it up. You mentioned you were doing some events. Is it this summer that you will pick this up?
Yeah, like, very soon.
Very soon. Okay, cool. So yeah, follow Smriti on LinkedIn or whatever if you want to learn more about this. Strongly encourage minorities to come into the field. It's not an easy field, but it's accessible to everyone. And I'm sure that with some work, everyone can do very well.
Exactly. And the good thing is that sometimes something that I have observed, is that, and you can say, like, what you feel about it, and I would love to hear your opinion also. But sometimes it's like, if you are not in the field, like someone looking from the outside, artificial intelligence looks like a very singular field, like something with very singularity, when you have to do a lot of things. But it's something that probably has the most amount of collaboration, right? Like, you work with data analysts, domain experts. I work with people who are expert in trees and, like, soil and stuff. So I think, maybe, like, a little more understanding that you're also doing, right? Like, the projects, like, when people come here and they share their experience,
Mhm.
it the masses, the people who want to get in but are intimidated, maybe they get to understand that it's not, all the responsibility is not on one person, and it's all
Exactly.
shared, compartmentalized.
Exactly. You're doing part of the analysis, but then you have the data engineer who is giving you the data and everything. You need to talk with domain experts to understand the problem and their vision and which features should go to your model. So in the end, it's a lot of communication as well. And it's also, it looks like there are a lot of things that you need to know, but you don't need to know everything to be a data scientist. You don't need to know SQL, Python, stats, machine learning, software engineering. You don't need to be an expert in everything. You just need to have some basis, know one or two fields, and then you can start and you will progress. And that's the most important thing. You don't need to be an expert from day one.
Exactly. I mean, like, probably a lot of people reach out to you as well, saying that, okay, so do I need, like, these skills to become a
Mhm.
data scientist? And it's like 17 things, and I don't know 10 of them. So I'm like, no, you don't. It's like, just try, and you learn a lot on the job. Like, you learn so much on the job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I usually reply like have some basic maths and basic programming knowledge. The rest you can probably learn on the job or do a course. But yeah, I don't think you need every. If you have some basic maths, basic programming, yeah, you should be fine to start knowing more about the field.
Exactly.
So I just want to ask two quick questions before we finish the episode. The first one is with your, well, in your opinion, what's a good data scientist according to you? What do you think is what is a good data scientist? Maybe based on someone that you've worked with or based on your experience. What do you think?
I mean, I think someone who's a good data scientist, or, like, a good engineer in general, maybe. Um, it's just not the technical skills, in my opinion. Like, there are a lot of people with great technical skills, But in my opinion, it's also got to do so much with the communication, right? If you can explain what the magic is and how it's happening in and communicate it with a good, like in a good way, I think that's something that's very appreciated, because most times if you are like deploying a project and working in like commercial processes, it has to be white box and explained well. If you can get the results, that's great. But if you can't explain how it's happening, or you don't provide a good straightforward explanation, then I think that's a little difficult to manage.
Yeah, that's a super good point, I think. Like, if you've worked on a project and you explain everything in a super complicated way that no one understands, people won't like your project and won't think it is useful, and it won't be used, because if they don't understand something, they're not going to use it, right? So it's important to explain also in simple terms. First, you need to communicate, but you also need to be understood by others and talk in simple terms to make sure that you're all on the same page. So I think it's a very good point. So one last question, maybe, if you just had one advice for someone to progress in their career, like just one advice, what would it be?
My advice would be probably that not to get intimidated. Like, technology can be very intimidating. I was in Himalayas for 2 weeks, and when I came back, there were already new things in the world. So like, no one knows everything, and like, if you want to learn something in technology, I think whatever background a person comes from, if they practice a little, put in some efforts, it's easy to learn. So I think it's got to do a lot with the attitude and practice, and not getting intimidated is a huge thing.
Okay, well, that's also a super good point. I completely agree with you. Yeah, thanks a lot, Smriti. It was really great to chat with you. I learned a lot from you. Yeah, it was good to chat about climate, about AI for diversity, and on basically your view on why AI is so important in this world. So yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good day, and hope to see you very soon.
Thank you so much. And the questions you asked was so amazing. And I love, like, your insights and the questions, it made me think some things in a different way, which is always so nice. Like, I learned so much from you, and it's really nice. And you're doing an amazing job with the podcast.
Cool. Thank you so much. Really appreciate. That's so nice from you. Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well. Thank you. Bye.